Hello and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth. I was going to do a critique on the State of the Union, but Mr. Pollock at Counterpunch wrote such a fantastic piece on the State of the Union that I don't feel that I need to comment any further. So I'm going to leave a link to that story, Bread and Circuses at the State of the Union at Counterpunch, and urge you all to read it because it states very clearly and quite eloquently how ridiculous the president's speech was. I wanted to comment on a couple of things, though, in respect to that, of course, and I want to point out something that he does not make clear in that article, and that is, of course, the use of the wedge issues. And I will note the masterful presentation of the speech in and of itself, which came out very early on in the speech with his continued and aggressive attacks against Medicare and Social Security. And apparently Medicare, though he had said that Medicare would not be pretty much a major thing in anything upcoming for him, apparently that was thrown out the window in concessions to the rich and powerful. And as you will read in Counterpunch, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. So he came out with guns blazing against Medicare and Social Security right away. But liberally interspersed in the State of Union address were the wedge issues, and he ended on the major wedge issue of the day, which is the gun issue. Now, the wedge issues, as I've said before, are designed to inflame the various parties on both sides, to get them all riled up and excited about either supporting or opposing the agenda of the person bringing them up. And it's supposed to radicalize the most radical members of your base. And of course, this is working perfectly for President Obama, because I didn't see any critique of his continued assault on the social safety net by any liberal pundits, and most of them were quite glowing in their praise of the president simply because of his championing of the wedge issues. And there were other wedge issues in the speech as well, and the liberal dispersion of them throughout the State of the Union address was well played on his part, because it covers up and tends to shield him from any criticism from his own people, the people that put him into office, for his continued assault on everything that these people believe in and rely on when it comes to actual real things in their life. Now, as I've said before, wedge issues are ultimately something that need to be dealt with, but when you are in a depression, and make no mistake, we are still in a depression, even though we are propagandized to fucking death with how things are turning around and how many jobs have been created. There are so many people that have left the labor force that you can't even get a real good number on how many people are unemployed. And let's not forget that the jobs created by Mr. Obama or his administration or any of the policies enacted by him during his 4 terms in office have all been shit jobs, part-time, low pay, minimum wage jobs. And let's also remember that it was in 2008 that Obama promised that he was going to push for raising the minimum wage to $9.50 an hour. And he couldn't even come through on that. Now, could he? He could only go as far as $9, which I needn't remind anybody that working full-time at $9 an hour still leaves you in desperate poverty and unable to pay your fucking bills. So it's a nonsensical comment that he made when he referred to this in the State of the Union. So we should not let full-time workers in the wealthiest nation in the world work full-time and live in poverty, implying that $7.50 an hour is living in poverty, and proposing a $9 minimum wage, which is not living in poverty. That's still well into poverty and well unable to pay your fucking bills and be a contributing member of society. It's just a total joke. Go read the article at Counterpunch. I'll put a link in. A comment on Darth Sidious, a.k.a. Pope Ratzinger, or Benedict XVI. stepping down. Certainly unprecedented, but I could certainly imagine that over the last several years it has been quite weighing on his fragile old man body, the efforts to cover up and deny and shuffle and drag your feet for the widespread molestation of children within the Roman Catholic Church, and the twists and turns that have to be done in order to try and cover up the rampant illegality and utter disgusting fucking rape and molestation and sodomy that are going on with the priests that he has to cover up and oversee. I imagine that, like any mob boss, he is probably under a great deal of stress and suffering debilitating conditions that would hamper his ability to continue the massive cover-up and priest hiding and hiding of records and not helping law enforcement and not seeking any kind of justice or rooting out this kind of disgusting, evil, rampant garbage within his so-called church. I imagine that does weigh quite heavily on him. And perhaps his resigning from that post will allow a younger, well, at least slightly younger anyway, because they never elect anybody who isn't old as hell, slightly younger guy to be able to shuffle those priests a little bit more diligently, to burn and destroy records a little bit more thoroughly, and to have a more attention to detail approach to hiding the atrocities of the fucking church and their continued and rampant molestation and pedophilia and pederasty within the ranks of their priesthood. So it really doesn't come as much of a surprise. Well, of course, there is much talk about the prophecies of Malachi and how the next pope will be the last, according to him, and that would be Petrus Romanus. It's interesting to note, at least in passing, if you give any credence to the idea of the Malachi prophecies, that one of the chief guys in line for the papacy is Peter Turkson. And of course, Petrus Romanus means Peter the Roman, or Peter from Rome. And so it'll be interesting to see if there's any kind of connection. And I'm sure even if it's a very tenuous one, someone somewhere is going to make it. And supposedly that's the last pope before the final judgment. Yeah, well, we'll see. Won't we? So that's my explanation for what's going on with Darth Sidious, a.k.a. Pope Ratzinger. And finally, a commentary on Christopher Dorner. Now, I'm sure the conspiracy realm is going to fly rampant with this entire story. I want to make a couple things very clear. If Christopher Dorner is who he has been portrayed to be, and he did commit the acts that are attributed to him, then he deserves absolutely no kind of praise, and certainly should have faced justice for the things that he did. Targeting innocent family members of fellow policemen certainly doesn't give him any kind of praise from me, and shouldn't give him any kind of praise from anybody else. Had he been able to conduct a sort of asymmetrical warfare against the LAPD without killing innocent people or without injuring innocent people in the process of doing this, I probably would have praised him like so many others have. But there is a possibility, of course, that the entire thing was a manufactured charade. But I do not know enough about this in order to say that, and I'm not going to promote that as an idea because I simply cannot say so. But just looking at the facts as we see them right now, or as they are presented to us by the mainstream media, which fucked up again in this case, I might add, saying that a charred body was removed from the cabin prior to any body being found. They also reported on a set of ID wallet apparently found near the Mexico border, reportedly being of Christopher Dorner, implying that he escaped to Mexico sometime earlier. But, of course, whenever the cabin was burnt to the ground and a charred body was eventually found, they dutifully reported that next to the body was a wallet with ID, a California driver's license of Christopher Dorner. And, of course, when a body is burnt to a crisp and unidentifiable, it's easy to imagine a wallet lying next to that body in the same heat and inferno having a plastic driver's license that is absolutely easily identifiable as belonging to somebody. So I'll leave that cognitive dissonance to churn around in your brain for a moment and remind you of 9/11 and the mysterious passports showing up on the sidewalk of the supposed hijackers that survived the conflagration of a jetliner crashing into a fucking skyscraper and then blowing up into a giant ball of fucking flame with a couple singe marks around the edges. Now, there is no question in my mind that the Los Angeles Police Department has a history and a continuation of that history of absolute negation of civil rights and a complete disregard for the rules of law with the way they handle people and with their conduct as a so-called police department. And certainly, they need to be scrubbed clean of every fucking disgusting piece of shit that embeds themselves within that department. And the only way they can get any kind of credibility again is pretty much to burn the fucking place to the ground and start over again, because they have a very long history of being involved in COINTELPRO and all of these kinds of activities, and it certainly seems in recent years that they have continued this same kind of mentality. And let us not forget, in the efforts to try and capture Christopher Dorner, they shot people that didn't look anything like him, shot at trucks that didn't even resemble his, in a frenzied effort to deal out violence in response to violence. And of course, this is something that will get you nowhere, except to point out that you are an institution that needs to be razed to the ground. And in the final events with Christopher Dorner, of course, there was the burning of the cabin. And apparently there is some confusion here on this part. Tear gas, of course, can be quite flammable. But the police chatter that was covered by some of the audio from the police indicates that several of them were cheering on the fact of burn the cabin down, burn the motherfucker down, implying that the police had set the fire deliberately in an effort to actually burn him alive in the cabin while surrounding it and preventing his escape. And so it's not clear to me totally as to whether or not the fire was purposeful or accidental, but it certainly, once it was started, it seems that the police did allow it to go on to complete disintegration of the cabin to make sure that if he was hiding in some cubbyhole inside, that he would be completely burnt up and dead, guaranteeing his complete and utter deadness. And of course, there is no excuse for that as well, and that is just another charge against the LAPD for their efforts to engage in this sort of official vigilante justice of killing and burning people alive to death as an effort to solve criminal cases. And of course, there is no excuse for that either. And that's just another example of why the LAPD needs to be investigated. And as I said again, if what we're being presented as the actual actions of Christopher Dorner, in that he shot and killed innocent people in this entire exchange with the LAPD, that he doesn't deserve any praise in that. If somehow this is being manufactured, I'll look at it some more and see what comes out as the days go on. Still, innocent people were killed in this. So if it was an op, it was an op that did not go in a way that should have happened. So anyway, those are my 2 cents. Have a good day.